Are you an alternative black person? And have you ever experienced being in an alternative space, which is technically supposed to be a safe space for said alternative people, but instead you were turned into the weird person that all of the non-black people were glaring at because they're confused as to why there is a black person in the space, even though they're also alternative? Because if you have, I have too. Aww. And we're gonna have a chat. So it's time to grab your pen and paper, grab something to eat, because I have on these glasses, and because I have on these glasses, that means school is in session, bitch. So let's get into the video. Hi, my name is Naima, also known as Bunny Online, the MB. And today, I will be discussing my latest experience of being treated really fucking weird in an alternative space. My thoughts on alternative spaces that are supposed to be safe spaces for alternative people are not always that, and why black people are always forced to create our own spaces where we feel safe, because that spaces that were probably never created to be safe spaces for black people, regardless if they're alternative, never make us necessarily feel welcome. So, hi. If you're new here, my name is Naima, and I like chatting. I'm a yapper. I'm a professional yapper, so yappity yap yap, yap yap. I'm an alternative NB. The title of this video is Alternative Black Girl Problems, but that's because alternative NB problems is very niche. But also, I'm also perceived as a cis presenting person, regardless of my NB status. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. More people would see me as alternative black girl first instead of alternative black NB, because side note, I feel like it's hard for people to like initiate the conversation of like, hey, what's your pronouns? How do you identify? What's your gender identity? So most people don't. So they just take people at first glance. So they see me as a femme presenting person and they're like, oh, that's a girl. That's a woman. No, not a woman. Not a woman. Not a woman. I'm a alternative black NB that's also an alternative black woman, because the black woman can never necessarily separate from the woman, cannot separate from the blackness. So because of that, yeah, if you're gonna see me as anything, see black woman first, you know, even though I'm an NB. It's really complicated. The math is hard to explain sometimes, so I'm just getting into the video. So, story time. I went to my friend's concert over the weekend. It was phenomenal. Oh my god. My friend ate that the up. Chewed. Literally demolished. It was amazing. However, I am taking issue with a couple of people. First things first. Let's start at the beginning of the day. It was a Thursday, and I went downtown early that day to perform a spoken word poem, because yes, I wrote a spoken word poem for my alma mater. I was asked to perform in the Ethics Awareness Week fair, and my friend, who I went to the concert for, they showed up, and I'm immensely grateful for that, because oh my god, what a day. What a show. So outside of that, after the performance, I spent the whole day in Atlanta. I went to museums, I saw a lot of art. It was such a beautiful day. My only issue is that I forgot to bring my portable charger, so my phone almost died. Also, I was sweating a lot. I was dressed prepared for like 60-degree weather. It was in the 70s. And when I say 70s, I mean like high to mid 70s. So I was sweating. It was not nice. I had sticky bangs. And this is related to what I'm gonna say now. But if anyone had to stare at me for any reason, it was probably the sticky bangs, because I was sweating my ass off. Anyways, global warming is tearing our asses up. If it's like this next year, but higher, it was nice. So the concert was supposed to start at 7. I arrived a little early. I got lost trying to find a venue because I didn't understand what the hell underground means. If you're new, I live in Atlanta. So underground is one of those places where if you want to go to any of the clubs, the raves, etc., or like indie concerts, you go to the underground. Underground is hard to find at first, but once you find it, you're like, yay, I found the underground. Now I got to find the venue that is being held at the underground. I find a venue. After walking around the underground a couple of times in a loop, trying to figure out where the place is, and I eventually find it. I get there and I realize I'm technically early. The concert was supposed to start at 7. I get there by like 6:50 something. I get there and I sit. I go on my phone periodically from time to time, but my phone was about to literally die. So I was like, fuck, my phone's about to die. So I turn my phone off and I'm just looking around, hoping that eventually I find somebody that I know so I could talk to, so I'm not just waiting by myself. In the meanwhile, the person who is headlining the tour, they come in, they set up stuff, they set up a merch table. One of the performers was also the person who was in charge of the tickets. I was just sitting down in the area where people were technically designated to wait in. So I was waiting for the ticket person to like set up and stuff. I wasn't in any rush either. Like I literally did not care. I was just, just waiting for my friend to show up. I'm an anxious person. Like, if you were to ever see me in person, like, I look cool, calm, and collected on the surface, maybe. But, like, 9 times out of 10, you may see me have, like, a glazed look where it's like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here. Because I have social anxiety. I'm neurodivergent. All of these things. Then I'm black. Then I'm femme presenting, out of all things. So, like, bitch, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck to do. And it's like, the election was a couple of days ago. So, like, it was literally 2 days before the concert. So I'm looking around. I see the headliner. Once they are done setting up, I see them. They make their way over to me. We have, like, a generally short conversation. Shouts out to the person headlining the tour. Really nice person. Most of the people there in the space, for the most part, were non-black. I would say white, but I'm not completely sure if everyone there was white, so I'm saying non-black. The headliner has a couple of friends. It's 2 people, and the 2 people, they come in, they're checking everything out. They talk to the headliner, they talk to the couple of artists who were already there with their stuff ready to set up. Every so often, they would like pass by me, and every time that they pass by me, I could sense that they're like looking at me. It wasn't in like a cordial way, or the way that they were staring at me. It was with a glare. Every time that it happened to me, I was always confused. And so I was kind of like brushing it off because I was like, listen, I'm just here for my friend. Like, yeah, my friend, they get there. They're like the 3rd person to perform, I think. So one of my friends came, and I know this person. So me and the person were like, oh my God, you're here. And then we start chatting and stuff, right? One of those people who was like glaring at me like some type of way. Like, once she saw the other person acknowledge me, she was like, oh, okay. Yeah, like, oh, okay. This is where the issue really kicks in for me. Once it's time for my friend to perform, my friend's friend is sitting next to me, and me and my friend's friend had like a brief conversation. After that, there's like a pause or whatever. The headliner's friend, the person who was glaring at me, along with the other person that they were there with, start engaging in a conversation with my friend's friend. By the way, my friend's friend is not black. Like, they're having a whole conversation, and the person's like, oh my God, like, why are you here? Da, 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 da. To the non-black person, right? They're like, oh, like, who are you here for? Da, 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 da. Have we ever met? Blah, 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 blah. Engaging so nicely, so excitedly in this conversation with the non-black person, right? Cool. Noted. Noted, right? So then once it's time for my friend to set up, my friend is like, hey, could you like record me? I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I got my camcorder, so I'm recording with my camcorder, and I'm also recording on their phone at the same time. Once they're on stage, they start performing. But before they start performing, they ask a question, basically asking like, is everything good? Can everyone see me? Do I sound all right? Blase. I stick up my thumbs, and I'm acknowledged. My friend is like, oh, okay, now I'm gonna stick up their thumbs, so I must be good to go. That the same person who was glaring at me, right, looked back at me, and I look back at them, and then I look back at my friend who's performing. By the end of my friend's performance, their best friend shows up along with their partner, and so my friend runs over to their best friend, they hug, we start chatting, blase, and then we leave. So here are my thoughts. First things first, I don't like being glared at. I really don't. You could tell the difference between a person looking at you and an acknowledgement type of glance versus like a glare. Like, you could feel the difference because there is a tension there. I felt uncomfortable, and above all else, once the person acknowledged my friend's friend in a completely different manner, I picked up on the cues of like, oh, these bitches might be racist for real, because what the fuck was that? So it is time for the discussion. portion of the video. Thank you for making it this far. So I want to discuss white glare and why it's so off-putting to Black people, but in general, non-white people. So what is white glare? White glare is when, as a non-white person, you enter a space and there's white people there, and every so often you will see a white person pass you by and they give you... In a way, it's off-putting. I would say it's a form of covert racism. It's kind of gaslighty. If you try to confront the person who is giving you the glare, they could easily just say, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I wasn't even looking at you. And it's weird. You can also be trying to, like, ask people for their opinions about what the fuck just happened to you. Like, that person was just staring at me. And you will have a number of responses because, honestly and truthfully, you will never know what was going on inside of that person's brain, since technically they didn't necessarily conduct verbal communication with you. And so you're reading nonverbal communication cues from this person. They're trying to communicate that they don't want you in the space without verbally saying, why the fuck are you here? It also makes me think of epigenetic trauma. It is basically trauma that is passed down through your ancestors all the way through your parents to you. Your bloodline has developed trauma responses to the certain actions conducted by people who inflicted trauma upon your family members, if that makes sense. So for African Americans, white glare is not a new phenomena. This is an old phenomena. If I can think about any of my more recent ancestors who experienced white glare, it would probably be my great-grandmother, Ma, or all of my great-grandparents, because they lived in the South during the time periods that they were alive, Reconstruction era of America. You would have to deal with the glares of white people not necessarily knowing what they're thinking, but based on the vibe. They didn't pass the vibe check. It's giving weird. It's giving they're probably racist. And so I think initially having that experience in that space and the alternative space was daunting because I never necessarily had that experience outside of like going to anime cons and stuff. You know, that's racist white nerds. You deal with those experiences or going to Florida or traveling throughout the South. Traveling in the South, you get the white glare. It is a normal occurrence, you know, so it wasn't necessarily my first time experiencing that, but it was my first time experiencing that in an environment like a concert. So that's my thought on that. I think in actuality, white glare is a taught behavior, because why are you glaring at people like that? That's really what it is. And I did not like being made to feel uncomfortable in a space where I feel like I was supposed to feel comfortable because it's a concert, so I'm supposed to have fun in this type of environment. And on another note, I did find one of the people who was more so the companion of the main culprit who was glaring at me. I found their Instagram. Yeah, I have thoughts. Because here's the thing, right? People make this assumption that like all forms of racism, covert racism, microaggressions, all of these cues that do not pass the vibe check when it comes to being in spaces with Black people, that there are automatically super conservative racists, right? We do have to have these conversations, and I think Black people on the internet have been trying to have this conversation for quite a while, that, and not even just on the internet, but like even Malcolm X had this discussion where white liberals are just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than conservatives, because at least with conservatives and like white supremacists, you know who they are. But the people who were glaring at me, they gave me the vibes of white liberals. And when I found the person's page, their friend's page, the person who was like, you know, standing beside the person who was glaring at me the whole time and occasionally glaring at me too, I found out that they had the Palestinian flag in their bio and that they do activism work and all of those things, right? But they were still glaring at me. They still gave me the weird white off-putting glare. I don't know, we have to have more conversations about white liberals and liberalism, because I'm not a liberal, I'm a socialist. And I think about how we're in such a uncomfortable time in our country's history in the US. People are feeling some type of way about a lot of things. We should also bring up the conversation of like the stupid blue bracelets, because even the white women, some of them who are doing that, still exhibit forms of covert racism. They still participate in white glare. And as I was on the friends page or whatever, I saw that they were in community with several different Black people. So it also brought up the question of, why were you glaring at me?
So I'm laying in my bed editing this video, and in this particular portion, I wish I went more in depth with what I was thinking, but in short, I was trying to, or at least start the conversation about like white allyship and how it will not save us, and we cannot bet too much capital on white allyship, in particular because white people are granted this privilege to compartmentalize what matters more to them in the moment. You have white people who want to try to prove to non-white people that they're an ally, that they're willing to protest and do all of the work to be in community with said non-white people, but they still have to do a lot of unpacking of anti-blackness, Islamophobia, fat phobia, ableism, all of these things, all sorts of discrimination made under white supremacy that benefits them. And they also need to understand how it's very daunting to look at a white ally during this time period and not feel some type of way when you see them going up for bat for one group of people while simultaneously being an agent of white supremacy towards another.
It brings up all of these feelings, and it utterly sucks because people are weird, and you will never necessarily know what's going on underneath the surface as to why white people are conducting white glare and how they operate in certain spaces, who they choose to interact with on a polite plane versus who they choose to exhibit covert racist white glare at. And ultimately, I made this video to complain and to vent. But I think we do need to have more conversations about white glare and the historic disenfranchisement that has coincided with white glare and how white glare is dangerous. And I think as a black, fat, queer person in America, why I feel in particular a type of way about being glared at by white, queer, liberal, leftist, white people in quote unquote progressive spaces. And yeah, final point. The reason why black people are forced to enforce such strict boundaries when it comes to our own centered events and spaces is because we know the collective history of us creating genres and creating spaces where we have allowed non-black people to infiltrate the space, and they literally took it over, claimed it as their own, and kicked us out of said spaces. So the reason why we have a lot of people now, especially black people, who are like, we don't want no more white rappers, we don't want no more white people in our genres, is for that reason. Because we do not want to keep getting kicked out of spaces where initially we were welcoming to people, but people took it upon themselves to kick us out of, to treat us less than, and to avoid all of those all of that conflict, all of those annoying microaggressions, to avoid all forms of racism and all of the other tactics of white supremacy within our spaces. We have developed this very strict, hard line where we're like, you could listen. We don't even really want you listening, but you can listen, I guess. But you will not take the top spot. You will not be the next version of Elvis in our genre. You will just be a visitor here. Because time and time again, we have created genres like grunge. That was another genre that I forgot to mention, but grunge being spearheaded by a black woman, and her legacy not necessarily getting all the acclaim that she deserved for spearheading that movement of grunge. Same thing goes for rock and roll, and why black people, especially now, go so hard to prove how heavy of a hand black people served in the creation of these genres. The reason why black people have DreamCon and other black conventions for our nerdy umbrella type of niche interests is because we have been treated so bad at the other conventions. We have a lot of us, a lot of black nerds, a lot of black alternative people have been treated so badly in alternative spaces to the point where we're like, listen, okay, if you're gonna be racist here, cool, fine, you can have it, but I just have to create my own now, and I'm gonna put up strong, hard boundaries, because listen, you can like what we talk about, but from afar, and you will not take up the same amount of space that you have taken up in so many other spaces here. Yeah, it's hard being an alternative black person, but especially an alternative black femme, masc presenting, or woman in general. It's hard being an alternative black woman, femme, masc person, because there's a form of gender politics that is intersected with all of that. The misogyny, the misogynoir. You also have all the other covert forms of racism, like colorism and texturism, all of those things. Anti-blackness. It sucks, especially when you see cosplayers get dogged out on the internet and even in real life at conventions, because nerds, but especially weird racist or anti-black nerds, hold these characters, but especially the over-sexualized femme presenting characters, to such a high standard where they always see them as white or Asian. There's a whole conundrum of stuff happens. So in order to prevent all of that annoying stuff from happening, especially in real life, we just create our own black spaces. So going into the future, I didn't want to be like this, but I guess I got to now. I'd rather just be in black spaces with black people, because at least I know in that terrain I may be discriminated against because of my hobbies, but I'd rather be there than be in a room full of covert racists who just so happen to like the same shit that I do, but they don't want to be out front and super racist. They want to be different. Because the other aspect of this, right, is being a covert racist or exhibiting covert racist tactics like white glare and quote unquote supposedly diverse spaces while trying to be alternative, when being alternative also goes against the grain of white supremacy. So you're trying to be alternative, but you're exhibiting white supremacist behaviors. So you're being a poser! And even though you are in community with black people, it's still happening. It comes out when you're not familiar with another black person in the space. So, I don't know. People weird. People losing it for real. And if you have experienced this form of white glare, covert racism, hidden under, the fact that they try to use their style or their person, they try to build their personality around their style and the alternative backgrounds that they just so happen to cohabitate in, just know that you're not delusional, and that that person was actually being off-putting. And I want everyone to know that, again, almost every genre that was created in America, but especially in the West, has been influenced or at least created in some capacity by black people. So I want us to actually get a grip and understand that, like, black people, if it wasn't for us creating that type of genre, as in rock and roll, rock, gospel, country, pop, jazz, blues, that y'all wouldn't be able to, infiltrate the space to the point where you literally kick us out of the said spaces that we created. If you can't acknowledge that, then you're weird and you're delusional. But also know that you're, like, if you are the person who is kicked out or made to feel othered in that space, you're not delusional. You experience the things that happen to you in those spaces. And it's hard, ultimately, to be a black alternative person because people want to size you up. People want to have pissing contests. All these things. And it's really weird. But also, I do want to say this. It has taken me over a decade to customize my character to the extent that I have. I need you to get a grip. And I need y'all to stop exhibiting white glare. Start having hard conversations. The world's about to implode. Do you really want your last action to be remembered on the internet of you being a weirdo glaring at a black person for being in a space? I don't think so. But maybe you do. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Please let me know your thoughts down below. And I shall see you in my next video. Bye.